So first off, thank you for joining me all the way from Miami. I know
Thanks,
you're busy
Frank.
and
Thanks.
you're traveling quite a bit. Part of your company is obviously outside of that area too. But before we get started with that, I just want to talk a little bit more about your background.
Sure.
Just give me kind of like a quick version of what you've been up to for the last 10 years or so.
So yeah, I'll go a little further back.
Okay, 20 years.
Started in '99.
Yeah.
My first internet company. I was in going to school at the University of Miami.
Yeah.
I dropped out. It was to build a business. It was a company called Te Respondo, which means I'll answer you in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And we got enamored by the bubble. Went bankrupt in 2001. Rebuilt the business in 2002. Iterated a bit during that process and built essentially what AdWords became and what GoTo.com was doing back in those days.
Yeah.
GoTo.com became Overture, then became Yahoo Search Marketing, then AdWords was born, and we had by 2003, 2004. Grown very quickly in Latin America, particularly Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. Yahoo and Google started competing head-on to enter that market, and Yahoo acquired the company in 2005.
Okay, awesome. So you exited that first company.
Yeah, that was the first business. Then started another company buying domain names. We bought a bunch of travel domains. That didn't go so well. Then in 2009, fast forward to 2009, got involved with .co, or rather, won a bid to run .co.
The .co domain.
The .co domain,
wow.
Right. And launched it in 2010.
So I guess how do you even do that? How did you get involved in that? I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to take on owning a domain, like the .co extension. Like
So, by virtue of having bought and sold domain names for some time, we understood that the domain space had become a scarce resource, right? There was scarcity in domain names, and it sort of felt unnatural. And it really, it's a problem that every single entrepreneur goes through when they're trying to build a business, is trying to name their company online. And I had gone through that process or that experience. I had felt that experience many times, and it's an extremely emotional moment, right? When you're trying to name your business and your domain name is taken. So it became pretty evident that we needed an alternative on the internet, something that was credible, global, something that had a relationship with commerce maybe.
Yeah.
And .co kind of stood out in a very clear way, with the challenge that .co is a country code for Colombia. So what we ended up doing was licensing the domain from the country of Colombia.
And you're from?
I was born in Colombia.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah. And so after a big public procurement process, the government set this up, and big companies like VeriSign, which runs .com, came in and participated in that process, and we eventually won.
And you won.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was 2009. You won that bid, and then you're like, oh wow, we won. Now we got to build a company, right?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So that was 2009. We won, and then we launched. The actual launch day was July 20th of 2010. And actually, I was thinking about this last night when I was at the hotel. The parallels between the Downtown Project and .co are striking. You have basically what is, in a sense, this empty wasteland, right? And you have to build it into a vibrant community. And so it's literally like a real estate project. You want to attract some early adopters, some anchor tenants into the space, so that they in turn help you attract other anchor tenants and notable companies, etc. And we had so we established the vision that we wanted .co to be a place where innovation and opportunity would flourish, right? And so we landed Twitter before we launched.
Oh wow!
Around March of 2010, we knocked on a bunch of doors. AngelList started using Angel.co, Twitter T.co. This is literally before
we launched. And Google too, right? They have G.
Yeah, Google eventually bought, after we launched, they bought G.co.
Okay.
but by the day we launched on July 20th of 2010, there was this massive amount of interest for this space that was opening up.
Right.
And we've grown very quickly. We're up to 1.6 million domain names registered.
Wow.
Tech.co obviously is one of them.
Yep.
And it's really cool to see some companies already
up here, pitching.
Yeah, it's this Illumi. I had never met them before. Illumi.co and Nightpro.co is out there as well.
So word's getting out outside of just Miami and Columbia.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So you built this community, but you started with a .co domain, which in some cases maybe starting a domain maybe not that sexy to people, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no rule book or whatever, like, oh God, like this is what we're gonna do. How did you go about building a brand around a domain?
Sure. Yeah. So domain extensions particularly are treated like utilities, right? You just kind of turn on the light and turn up the switch and the light turns on. It's similar to that's the case with domains. You go buy it at one of these registrars and that's it. That's all there is. There's no real brand behind it.
Right.
And I think that's the most significant thing we've done in the company is to see it in an entirely different way. It's not a utility. It's a brand. It's a community.
And you have actual people. Like there's people that I know that I associate with .co. Right. When you think about any other domain, you're like, I don't know a face to go with that. Like,
yeah, exactly. So what we did was brand association.
Right.
We worked on brand association. So we targeted major tech players and companies that we could showcase as companies that we use. Sort of like what Nike did with Michael Jordan, right? Identify Michael Jordan as a top athlete and then associate it to their brand. We did that with companies like 500 Startups, so 500.co with Dave McClure, AngelList, obviously Twitter, etc. So that brand association is what drives the creation of
so
the brand.
Startups could and other businesses could do the same thing, right? So just they could take a play out of your book.
Absolutely. I think for startups, and we've done Super Bowl ads. We've done, major events. We've done all sorts of online advertising. And I have to tell you, for the ROI on getting early adopters that are notable and credible is exponentially higher than anything else we've ever done.
Got it. Super important. So people influence.
Yeah.
It's people influence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we talked about the brand a little bit. You've also built a community, right? Like you mentioned already, a community of millions of domains.
Yeah.
But you're tackling that differently than a typical domain.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there on the community side?
Sure. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, the utility thing, right?
Yep.
How we sat there and started to think about how can we add more value than just the domain, right? And the answer was let's build a community around this. And the word community is used loosely. I mean, we use it loosely as well. There's the intangible aspect of a community, which is really individuals that go to a certain place and they get together and they have a common interest, right? So at South by Southwest, for example, we had about 60 .co companies, and we gave them the VIP treatment, right? Getting into events, having dinners, partying. So that's sort of the intangible aspect of the community, and you get .coers talking to .coers.
Right.
Then the more tangible aspect is our membership program. So if you're a .co customer, you get access to a wealth of resources around education, promotion, networking opportunities. Those that make the community aspect more tangible. So
yeah, and that never heard anything like that for a domain.
Yeah, nobody does that. In our industry, that's we're pioneers in that.
You're blazing the new trail. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about some of the companies that work there. Even Vine, right? Like they're .co.
Yeah, Vine. Vine just launched, which was awesome for us. I mean, that happened one day. We saw a TechCrunch article saying that Vine was on .co, and it was,
That's a big deal, yeah.
High fives all around. But
let's talk about how would you approach companies that, want to start a new company? There's the .com and the .co available.
Yeah.
What's the incentive? I mean, you mentioned community. Like, how do you, let's say I'm a stickler and I want to be a .com. How do you approach that?
It's the toughest question, really. It's the same thing happens in real communities, right? When you are, how do you convince a company to not set up shop in Miami, or rather to set up shop in Miami versus setting up shop in Silicon Valley or Las Vegas and Silicon Valley? And it has to do with attracting the certain types of individuals that are disruptors, that are innovative, that are forward thinkers, that frankly do not want to be associated with the domain name for your parents, right? They want to be associated with a domain name that's kind of for the next wave of the internet, and not everyone fits that mold, right? Some people want to stick to the status quo, and that's fine. They'll go with .com.
And also, they should note that it's one letter shorter.
Yeah, apart from availability and the membership program and all these cool things that you get with .co, I think it really is about identifying these individuals that are
in a world of shorter character messaging and things like that. It definitely helps. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you're approaching like the future, right? So you've talked a little bit about community and branding, and you announced that there's an announcement last July about the new top level domains, and I wanted to get your take on that. You've been in this space for a long time, and there's a lot of companies here that could probably benefit from your knowledge on that space and where you see that going.
Yeah, so ICANN, which is the regulator of our space, is changing things up in a dramatic way, right? So before we lived in a highly regulated environment where there were limited options, limited domain extensions. Now we're going into a world where it's completely open, where any domain extension is viable or and will be available. So right now ICANN is in the process of launching 1,400 new ones.
Wow! They
just announced yesterday the first 3 or 4 are coming into the market in Arabic, Chinese, and Russian characters. So it's really an exciting opportunity, because finally we'll start to see the domain name system evolve into something innovative. It used to be very stale. Now you're going to have all these new options, and frankly, a lot of them competitors to our space. But we think that living in a world and competing in a world where people have options is actually much better for us than living in a world where people are only thinking about .com.
Right. Yeah. So how does it affect you guys? Like, does it?
There's going to be a massive fragmentation in the market.
Right.
But again, I think all these new alternatives are going to generate consumer awareness that it's okay to build a website on something other than .com. Yeah.
So is that true? Is it true that literally people could go out and get like Tech Cocktail or .Tech Cocktail? I mean, not that they would want to. It's really long.
It's true. You with $185,000, you can apply for it.
Wow.
There's the round right now. They opened the first round back in 2012. Right. We're seeing the applications from that round opening up, or rather getting implemented in 2014.
Do you think people do that though? Like, that's really long and kind of annoying. I mean, I love the name, but
you could have cool things like like a big brand, for example, could have and will have BMW will have .bmw. So
that's true.
Their next car, instead of launching it on BMW.com, they might launch it as new 7 Series .bmw.
Right.
I think you're going to start.
We're just switching down a level, right? It's not subdomains anymore. It's like going the other way.
Absolutely, and controlling your brand experience, right? In every sense, at least for brands. But then there's also the opportunity to start innovating with products. So one, for example, the experience of buying a domain name, then setting up email and setting up a website is something that traditionally are 3 disparate things.
Which takes some time to do.
In our case, the way we're trying to innovate is by bringing those 3 things together. So we built a product called Pop, pop.co, where you can actually get your domain, your email through Google Apps.
Oh, wow. And
all the productivity suite stuff that Google Apps offers, and a basic website or DNS services in a 60-second experience.
So is it online or mobile, or how do you?
Yeah.
Pop.co.
Pop.co. Yeah.
Wow. So if you were in the audience, you wanted to register a new domain, you could literally do that right now. Get all that set up within.
It'll take you less than 60 seconds to have a Google Apps account running and a website.
Email, running. Everything. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So Pop.co. So that's where you're seeing the trend go, where that was a trouble point for startups or people trying to create a.
Yeah, in general, what you're going to see with all these 1,400 new top-level domain options is innovation around product integration and or branding, right? So in our case, Pop.co is an example of that. But I think if you're, for example, .law, right? If .law launches, you could probably, what can you do with .law? You could probably create a product that integrates everything for, that's suitable for a law firm into a seamless brand experience, or product experience rather.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So there are going to be ways to make it easier for people to set up shop. Is that going to be an issue for like, I don't know, spam or things like that? Like
for what? Sorry?
Spam, like people starting these like random sites.
No doubt. I mean, no doubt there will be more opportunities, but I actually don't think that, in the case of, take the case of Twitter, right? There's some new product launches. It's called Twitter.
Right.
Are people going to then flood over to Twitter to fill it up with spam? And sure, there's some of that, but I think in general, this is really about innovation and introducing products and services that are actually useful and cool.
Here's a tough one. Well, tough question. Maybe it's tough, maybe it's not. Maybe this is an easy question. Do you think you'll ever dethrone .com, or have you already?
I wasn't ready for that one. That's not our objective.
Okay.
We don't want to be .com. .com is what happened in the last 25 years of the web.
Right.
We want to be the next 25.
It was a .com bust, right?
Yeah, if you look at .com as a whole, it's pretty much a wasteland. I mean, there's of the 115 million .com domains that are registered. Right. I'd say 30-50% of those are actually used websites. A lot of them are just taken up and they're unused. We've tried to stay away from this massive hoarding of domain names by pricing .co differently. Yeah, it's a premium pricing strategy, so you can get a .com for $8, $9. Right. .co is 3 times more expensive.
It's like 30 or something.
If you're a real business, our pricing is right for you. Is how we see it, and that deters in the end. Right.
Squatting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about. We're here at Celebrate. We got people from all over the country, including Miami. Let's talk about Miami for a little bit. Sure. So, the startup scene there is growing too, and I want to talk just a little bit about how you see that growing, where you see that going, and just your impact on that community. Sure. Yeah.
So, we set up shop in Miami mainly because I'm from Miami, but we're starting to see this big momentum in Miami as a startup hub or as a tech hub for a number of reasons. One is the geographic location of Miami relative to other big markets is really, it's privileged. We get on a plane and go to Sao Paulo or New York or Silicon Valley or London, and Miami is at the center point of all those markets. So it's great from a geographic location. It's great. The cultural diversity of the city is huge. You have people that speak Portuguese, Spanish, obviously English, obviously French, German, etc. It's a very diverse city. So if you're running a global company, Miami's a great place for that.
I noticed that just going to the airport, there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a hub. Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's been really good for us. But like any new market in tech, it's a process, right, to establish it, and I think it takes a few committed individuals, like what you guys are doing here, and maybe what we are doing in Miami, along with a few other companies that sort of take a stand and say, you know what, I don't need to build my company in Silicon Valley. I'm going to build it in Miami.
Right, and we'll be down there 8 times next year at least. Cool. And we're actually hiring a full-time reporter down there, so we're excited about things that are happening down there, and that's why I was curious on your take on that. All right, so we've got about 10 more minutes, but I wanted to see if you could just offer one more piece of advice for any startup entrepreneurs, founders, anybody that's here. One thing that you've learned from just all your different companies you've started, and even .co, and then we'll maybe do a few questions. If you guys have questions, get ready. If you have Twitter, you can tweet TC Celebrate any kind of question you want, and I'll be checking it in a minute, and we'll ask those questions to Juan on the stage. So first off, give you a second to think about that answer before you get going. It's
a very clear answer for me, frankly. Team. Team. Of all the different things that I've been involved with, companies that I've invested in or just built myself. The ones that tend to be successful are the ones that have a good team, not a great product. It's really about the team. Right. So focus a lot of your time on, if you're an entrepreneur thinking of something, focus a lot of your time on building that team and stop worrying too much about what the product looks like.
That's great that you say that, because I don't know if you noticed, even with the first set of pitches, we kind of went with, okay, what's your product quickly, talk about your team. Like, who's doing this
Right.
and what's your traction with that team? And
Yeah.
so we definitely see that, because ultimately you could turn into something else tomorrow. We don't really know.
That's it. You're never going to get the product right. You're always going to be iterating. And if you have a good team
You can do it.
to iterate with, that's it. You're done.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, let's ask some questions. Do we have a roving mic too? Or is it just on Twitter? Let's see. Yes, Jen's going to do a roving mic, but we're going to ask some questions here on the Twitter real quick. Again, hashtag TC Celebrate. In the meantime, have you been watching all the things going on with Life is Beautiful? That's pretty crazy. Did you walk around today?
I did.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Jen, you want to see if there's any in the audience? I'm still having a hard time here pulling these up. Any questions? Jen's got a mic. One over here on the side. And as I pull up the Twitter, I can't see any. Do you have any down there?
Yes, could you tell me how long you think it'll take for Icon to roll out all the new domain names?
So what's that progression? Do you think it's a quick turn the key type thing, or is it going to take a while?
So the 1,400 that are already sort of approved, it'll take between yesterday we saw the first 3 going to what they call the root, and you'll see those launch in the next 30, 60 days. That was the big milestone has been accomplished, which is getting a few in, and then you'll see the 1,400 roll in during the 2014 and 2015, and then after that round, they'll probably open up a new application period where other companies or individuals can apply to get their own as well.
Get another question over here.
I read an article where you talked about leaving Colombia and some advice that your father gave you that you've sort of carried through your entrepreneurial career. Can you talk about that?
What advice did you get from your father before you left from Colombia?
He said never look back. He said never look back.
Never look back.
I remember that, and that has served me well.
How's that influenced you, I guess?
You know, we tend to hang on to the things that have happened in the past, and we left Colombia at a time when Colombia was going through some really, really hard times. It was back in the 80s when the drug wars were pretty heated, and we left in haste from what was going on at the time. So he just used those words when we arrived in Miami. He said, "Never look back," and I never did for some time. I actually ended up going back and setting up to .co, etc. But I think just letting go of this, getting out of your comfort zone and realizing that whatever you had back home is gone, was useful. Yeah.
Right. So don't dwell. Just keep moving ahead.
Just keep going. So you fall and you got to get up and keep going.
That's great advice. Do we have Jen in the audience? Okay. Let's see. Anything on Twitter? Okay. Any other questions by anybody in the crowd? All right. Great. Juan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming up here and coming out to Tech Cocktail Celebrate.
Thanks,
Yep.